Tuesday, January 17th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight, we nominally talk about Mario and Luigi, Partners in Time, and Ultima Quest of the Avatar, but we also spend more time than you'd think arguing about the latest Supreme Court decision in Gonzales versus Oregon.
Let's do this! So you might have noticed today that I screwed up the forums a little bit, and there might have been some downtime or whatever.
Yeah, everyone lost their avatars.
Well, only people who uploaded avatars lost them. People who had their avatars on another website did not lose them.
I don't think anyone has their avatar on another site.
I think one person did, actually. But that's not the point. The point is there was a potential security threat to the forum, so I attempted to upgrade it to a newer version, and in the process, I accidentally overwrote the images directory, which had all the little icons in it.
Yeah.
So, oops, my bad. Nothing else is hurt. Just go re-upload your avatars, and everything will be back to normal.
Yep. I mean, we did it for your own good, because basically we built another site on the same host for another group out there. We talked about it a little bit. And we put the same kind of blog and forum over there. And I was logged into that forum, testing it. And then I go log into the Geeknights forum. And I discover that I'm, in fact, logged into the Geeknights forum as someone else. One of our fine listeners. Our friend, the Whale Shark.
Yeah, so there was basically a sort of, they usually call it a cross-site scripting attack, but it's not really cross-site because it was the same site with the same piece of software running 2 times.
It was like a cross-hashed cookie PHP session exploit.
I don't know what it was, but it wasn't. The guy, I wrote to the people who make the forum, and they said it was really a configuration error that isn't an issue anymore with the newer version that we're not going to use yet because it's still beta. But we'll use that version when it's no longer beta. The point is that it's solved now. I
mean, basically, all it could have done is someone could have logged in as you, but no one knew about it, and we fixed it before anyone found out.
Yep. So it's all good. Re-upload your avatars, and if you're not in the forum, go there because I put a secret there.
You didn't put shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really.
No, there's secrets there.
What secrets? I was just there a second ago.
Secrets to make people go there.
Yeah, so that means you're going to add a secret after the show while I'm doing post-production.
No, I already added a secret, but I'll add something more obvious later.
Uh-huh. So anyway, we actually have a bit of non-geek news, but it's a topic that we're real riled up about, so we figured we'd talk about it. Since people seem to like hearing our opinions and or us yelling at each other.
Yelling!
But as you're all probably aware, the Supreme Court ruled today in Gonzales versus Oregon that, and this is the majority opinion, that the DEA and the Attorney General's ban of assisted suicide, a federal mandate, violated the Constitution in the sense that it overrode an Oregon state law saying that assisted suicide is okay and that doctors can do it if they follow a procedure and the patient wants them to.
In other words, it was a vote in favor of states' rights.
Yes, in favor of states' rights, in favor of a right to die, in favor of limiting the power of the executive branch, and it was just really a really interesting ruling, and I guess we'll try to explain why for those of you who aren't big SCOTUS followers.
Yeah. So what's really cool about this is that it was 6-3, I think, right?
Yep. So even if someone, like when O'Connor steps down and Scalito probably gets in, it wouldn't have changed the result because he's almost definitely going to dissent on this opinion.
Mm-hmm. The next thing that it's important to note is the 3 people who voted against it were Roberts, Scalia, and Thomas.
Now, these 3 claim to be conservative.
They say they're conservatives, yet they voted against states' rights. Now, if that's not the opposite of conservative, I don't know what is.
I mean, basically, a little background on this case. I think it was in 1996 or 97 that Oregon passed a law saying that if someone's terminally ill and doctors verify that there is no way to help them, they're in pain.
I think they have to be definitely going to die within 6 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a doctor has to say this person will be dead within 6 months. They're in pain, blah, blah, blah. And a psychologist has to evaluate the person. And all these rules to make sure that this isn't abused. Then a person can go through all this and request a doctor to painlessly end their life. It was called the Dying with Dignity Act.
Actually, it's even less than that. The doctor doesn't even end your life. The doctor will prescribe to you pain-killing medication, and you have to go get that prescription filled and then take enough of it to kill yourself.
In fact, if you're
So
too weak to do it, they'll set up a device that'll do it, but you have to make the final call and push the button.
Yeah, so it's like the doctor doesn't even do it. The doctor just sort of... It's like someone saying, all right, you're not allowed to buy a gun, so I'm going to write a piece of paper that says you're allowed to buy a gun, and you can shoot yourself with it if you want to.
Now, again, I know it was called the Dying with Dignity Act, and regardless of your feelings on right to die or suicide, even though we're very opinionated about it, the fact remains that this was voted into law by the majority of voters. I believe it was a referendum in Oregon, and most people in the state agreed with it.
Mm-hmm.
So doctors started doing this. And back then, a bunch of Republican senators, like Orrin Hatch, that bastard, got together and decided that they didn't like this. They didn't like the fact that people could kill themselves legally.
Why don't you mind your own business? Nothing to do with you.
So they went over to Janet Reno and told her to intervene. And Janet Reno gave him the finger and said, that's the stupidest thing ever. It'd be unconstitutional. Leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing could happen.
Yeah.
Fast forward.
On a side note, I want to point out that pretty much almost everything in Oregon is a referendum, which means the people actually vote on all their most of their laws.
Yeah, Oregon's a really cool place. I didn't really know much about it until recently.
Yeah, like on election day, they get like these huge books full of stuff, and they have to go through and fill out all this crap like yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe. It's really cool there, as opposed to other places where your state government does whatever you don't know.
I mean, it's a mixed bag because sometimes people don't really know what's best, but at least the people of Oregon know exactly what they're getting into.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that they definitely voted for in a vast majority.
So, fast forward to recently. Bush is now president, and Gonzales / Ashcroft are attorneys general and such. Now, there's a clause in the Controlled Substances Act, which is it's basically the thing that they use, that and the Commerce Clause, to make drugs illegal federally. So things like marijuana and all that.
Cocaine.
And the drugs that were used by doctors to administer this death to people who requested it were Schedule II drugs, meaning that they're illegal unless prescribed by a doctor. And the legal way to prescribe them is to go through the CSA.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ashcroft said, oh, well, considering that the CSA says all these blah, 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 if you actually give people these drugs to kill themselves, killing themselves is not a valid use of that drug, and therefore what that doctor is doing is illegal, and irrespective of state laws making it legal, it is now a federal crime to do so. And they started trying to get all the doctors in Oregon thrown in jail.
All right, so the exact phrase in question was legitimate medical purpose. So they were saying that because suicide was about as far as you can get from... Well, let me quote the guy. If the term legitimate medical purposes has any meaning, it surely excludes the prescription of drugs to produce death.
Now, this coming from a supposedly conservative Supreme Court justice who... was that Ashcroft or was it one of the justices? Was that the dissenting opinion?
I think Scalia said that.
Oh. Now, Scalia is very conservative, he says. He's very pro-states' rights. Yet now he's saying that because he's arbitrarily against something, states don't have the right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not too fond of that.
Yeah, man, those lefties, those are the activist judges, let me tell you. Yeah. All right, so basically their argument for voting against it was that because killing someone or killing yourself is not a legitimate medical purpose, that you couldn't prescribe the illegal drugs for, this something that's not a legitimate medical purpose. So what this really, the decision, since we voted, those guys lost and the good guys won, was that now the definition of legitimate medical purpose is expanded to things like killing yourself, which could include, drugs that they don't want.
See, it's actually, this ruling is very complicated, and I could do a whole podcast on just the majority opinion here. But to try to sum up as briefly as I can, basically what they ruled is that, one, it's obvious if you read the CSA that is intended to prevent illicit drug use, specifically abusable drugs, and to eliminate the abuse of these drugs to better society.
As in getting rid of heroin addicts and crackheads.
And in addition to that, they also decided that, one, states' rights. The state has the right to do this, and the Attorney General does not actually write the CSA. He merely administers it. He parrots it. They even use the word parroting. The phrase parroting and anti-parrot canon appear fairly often around all these decisions here.
If an anti-parrot canon existed.
But basically, because it's not, he didn't write it and he didn't use it, he's just prescribing it, the Attorney General has no right to interpret it. It is the court's job to interpret it. And the only way to possibly use this as a means of preventing people from killing themselves is to interpret it as to say that it does not include killing oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they make like 5 or 6 other points, and they actually call Ashcroft out directly, basically making fun of him for making a decision on a subject that he knows almost nothing about and has no credentials in.
Wow.
They really ride him in this decision.
You know, I could see, like, if the Surgeon General did something like this, then it would be like, all right, okay, you know, we actually have a real thing going on here. But the Attorney General, a lawyer, getting involved in the doctor department, that makes a whole lot of sense. I mean, wow.
Yeah, now there's also another really interesting possible, well, 2 really ramifications of this. Is one, it may not realize it, but Roe versus Wade might weigh very heavily into this decision. Because this decision, among other things, says that states individually have the right to decide whether or not a medical practice is allowable, and that the federal government cannot do so. Mm-hmm. Now, it's possible that that would actually undermine Roe versus Wade, which said that states cannot regulate the right to an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Which, not to get into that, I disagree with Roe versus Wade in terms of the way it was decided, but I definitely agree with the right of a woman to have an abortion.
Yeah, but see, what they're saying is, because remember, it's about a legitimate medical purpose. So now what we can say is, if killing yourself is a legitimate medical purpose, could a doctor can prescribe medicine, then now we open the door. Killing a baby is a legitimate medical purpose, and the woman and doctor's allowed to do it.
Or by the same token, that a state could make abortion illegal despite Roe versus Wade, and this would be precedent for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really no way to say which way it would go. It's going to depend a lot on if Scalito actually gets entered into the Supreme Court, because basically he's going to vote on the side of the administration no matter what.
Yeah.
He's pretty much said as much.
But even if he was there right now, it's still pretty cool that it would be 5-4.
Yep.
You know?
Now, the other possible unintended consequence of this is that it really kind of guts the CSA in the way that it can regulate the use of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Because a couple of states have legalized medical marijuana recently. And every time they've done so, the federal government has said, up, CSA Commerce Clause, it's still against federal law, even though it doesn't cross state boundaries. We're going to come in and arrest you anyway. We're going to send federal marshals.
Mm-hmm.
So this basically says that the state has the right to regulate that and not the federal government.
Yay, states' rights.
So there are only 2 things keeping a state from legalizing drugs right now: the CSA and the Commerce Clause. Now, the CSA was gutted because of this decision. It really can't be used as justification for having federal laws that make substances illegal anymore. However, it does not get rid of the Commerce Clause, which... All right, we'll probably wrap this up because you don't want to.
The Commerce Clause is the line in the Constitution that says Congress is allowed to make laws like the CSA.
Yeah.
So Congress can make another law anytime they feel like, and there's not much you can do about it.
What the Commerce Clause does is it says that the federal government can regulate interstate commerce. Not intra, only commerce between 2 states or between a state and a foreign power.
Or between the federal government and a foreign power, but whatever.
Yes. Now, the thing is, the Commerce Clause is very broad, and for the last, pretty much since the Civil War, they've used the Commerce Clause to regulate internal state matters, and the rationale is that even though it's entirely within a state, it can affect other states, which, in my opinion, is horseshit.
It is. I agree that it's horseshit, but there's really not much you can do about it now. It's sort of like, well, they decided Roe versus Wade. There's not much you can do about it now. They've decided the Commerce Clause for hundreds of years to pretty much be anything. The federal government completely controls anything even close to commerce, and Congress can make any law it wants pertaining to anything even close to commerce, and there's not much you can do about it.
See, this all goes back to the Civil War, because, I mean, a lot of people down south and a lot of historians don't call it the Civil War. They call it the War of Northern Aggression. Now, I used to make fun of that a lot. The War on Northern Aggression. But imagine if slavery hadn't been an issue in the Civil War. Then, if you look at it, it's a bunch of states who have decided that they don't like the federal government and that they want to rule themselves, breaking away, and the federal government sending troops in and killing countless people and having a huge war and razing cities to the ground in order to force them to remain a part of a union that they'd want nothing to do with.
Yep. But then you think about it, you throw the slavery in there, and all of a sudden it becomes a bunch of slave drivers, and then this heroic country going to say, hey, if you want to keep,
I hate it when an ideology or basically when an ideology gets clouded by an issue. I'm with the South ideologically. The problem is they use that ideology to make an issue of something stupid. They wanted slaves, which is not cool.
Yeah. But at the same time, they could have wanted something good. It could have been like, hey, we want our states' rights so that we can have video games because there's a federal law outlawing video games, And that's a good thing. States' rights are good. But because it was associated with slavery, people think it's bad. But there's nothing wrong with it. It's great.
Yeah, there's only something wrong with slavery.
A lot wrong with slavery.
Yeah. But that's enough constitutional talk. We'll probably do a whole show on it sometime because we talk about geekery a lot. But we're very politically motivated, and we're very loud about it. And we could probably do an entire separate 4-day-a-week podcast just on politics.
There are different kinds of geeks. There are political geeks out there.
That works. If we ever run out of technology, let's just turn Mondays into geek
I don't think we're going
politics.
to run out of technology.
Hey, maybe there's some sort of Luddite revolution.
Then we'll definitely keep going on about technology to get rid of those Luddites.
So we had one more news bit, and we'll probably kind of gloss over it because we've gone a while already.
Yeah. Okay, so you might have read today. Well, you might know what I think about World of Warcraft. Not so great.
Yeah, today's real-life comics pretty much described what I think about World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Or
I think it might have been
yesterday's.
Doesn't matter. Basically, what's been happening in World of Warcraft is there's lots of gold farmers.
These are people who are basically hired, or they do it to make money, and they play the game grindingly to make gold and then sell it on eBay.
Or they sell it on other various websites.
Yeah.
Actually, there are various gold farmers and power levelers that were advertising in PC Gamer. And they would advertise in there monthly with like big expensive ads. And PC Gamer, the editors got together and they went to, the company that actually takes care of the ads. Because, video game editors don't actually, take care of the stuff on that level. They're below that. And they said, you have to stop putting these ads for gold farmers and power levels in our magazine. And they did. They gave up all that money to say, that's bad and we're going to get rid of it.
But there's been an unexpected consequence of all this in World of Warcraft. Now, there is a huge amount of discrimination against anyone who doesn't speak English.
Because what the common stereotype is that the gold farmers are Chinese people.
Which is kind of true.
Yeah. The thing is that, sure, most of the gold farmers are Chinese. There are some non-Chinese gold farmers, but most of them are.
But you know what? Most of the Chinese are not gold farmers.
Yeah. There are like 1.5 million people playing World of Warcraft in China, and a very small percentage of them are gold farmers.
It's just like spam. I mean, most spam in the world comes out of Russia and China.
Most email from Russia and China is not spam.
Yep.
Because there's just so much email. I'll draw a Venn diagram for you sometime, but I think you understand.
What, we should have some sort of like live oikaki to go with the podcast so we can have little diagrams and draw things.
Yeah, let's not. So now there's a problem where what's happening is people start a group and they want people to join, and they say, hey, before you can join our group, we don't know you. Type 2 or 3 sentences in perfect English, They ask them a couple questions and expect them to answer in English. And if the grammar is broken or anything like that, then they say, oh, you're just a gold farmer, go away.
Now, this is the point at which I call shenanigans on this possibly apocryphal tale. Because I don't think there's anyone in World of Warcraft who uses proper grammar.
I can name a few people, but I know those people.
Well, actually, Scott, you had some trouble with grammar the other day. Didn't know how an adverb works.
I know an adverb works.
You didn't seem to realize that adverbs can also modify other adverbs, and in fact cannot also modify adjectives.
Well, it's like a thing I know. It's like I use adverbs correctly when I speak and when I write. I just, don't know the the rules. Like,
yeah, I guess I can quote you yesterday.
it's like I can play D&D and I can roll a D20 and I can tell you if I hit or not, but I can't tell you, the difference between like a base attack bonus and a deflection bonus and God knows what other talk is in that book there.
So you write good.
Yeah.
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 We argue about grammar a lot. We don't really argue. Scott just says things. Yeah.
There's not really much to argue about grammar. There's right and wrong. You look it up and you say, "Oh, there's the right answer." That's
Though there was the point when you denied the fact that sometimes is or somewhat was an adverb.
Well, I didn't know it was an adverb. It didn't.
What'd you think it was? What'd you think it did?
It didn't seem very adverb-like. but then I looked in the dictionary and I was wrong. So what do you want?
Yeah. I mean, what did you think it modified? Somewhat what?
I guess it could modify an adjective.
Yep. Hence.
Yep. All right.
It's not an adjective.
No, but I figure, an adjective. I thought an adjective could modify an adjective. Why not? You ever do one of those name that tune kind of things where they play a song and you got to say what it is and who sung it?
Name that beard. Name that beard.
More like name that tune. But anyway, PBS, of all places, put up a nice little flash game where there are 18 questions, I think?
Yeah, 18.
And they play sound effects from old video games.
We're talking Atari and Intellivision too.
And old Atari era arcade machines. And then they ask you which game it was. And they'll give you 3 choices. And they'll also give you like a cryptic sentence as a hint on some of them. And I got a 15 out of 18, but that's because I didn't look at the hints, and a couple of them threw me off.
Yep, I didn't look at the hints either. I only got a 13, but 2 of them were bullshit, I gotta say.
Which ones are bullshit?
The Berserk one wasn't so much bullshit. It was
no,
more
it wasn't. I got that one right.
See, because I'm actually really, really good at the Atari version, but I didn't know there was an arcade version of Berserk.
There's an arcade version of everything.
At
least all the Atari games.
I defy you to find an arcade version of Snap fucking Foo.
Oh, look.
Yeah.
There might be. MAME has so many freaking ROMs, man. It's crazy. But anyway, if you want to test your old school Atari knowledges, head on over to my thing of the day, and you'll see how you stand up.
It's quite cool. Yeah, some of them are real obvious.
And real awesome.
So, my thing, this is in a Foreign Policy magazine, which I actually used to read. Because I used to be able to... Well, the thing is, in my high school, we had the LexisNexis for free, and we also had subscriptions to pretty much every magazine ever.
RIT had that. I didn't take advantage of it until way later, though.
Yeah.
But the internet provided much, much more.
Yes, it did. But I used to have time when I was just bored in high school, so I'd go to the library and just read like all these various magazines. I was a big fan of the Atlantic Monthly, too. Mm-hmm. But basically... This is a nice online bit, and they think they have more in the magazine. But it's a photo journal of Bangladeshi scrap workers.
Bangladesh, isn't that like one of the poorest countries there is?
Yes, Bangladesh is one of the poorest countries that has ever existed.
I mean, I remember a thing from a Bangladesh guy, and this was back in the days when they actually talked about first world, second world, third world, instead of developing and developed nations. And... the guy was like, yeah, Bangladesh is like the 4th world nation. It's so bad and so poor.
So Bangladesh also has pretty much the largest beach in the world. And it's also used as the largest docking or dry docking facility in the world. And super tankers? By super tanker, I mean the giant oil tankers they're the biggest things on the ocean. They're bigger than super aircraft carriers, and they carry oil around. They wear out pretty quick, and when they get decommissioned, more than half of them in the world end up in Bangladesh, where, and I kid you not, about 200,000 peasants with their bare hands tear them apart to scrap, and that is the primary industry there. This accounts for almost all the steel that Bangladesh has.
That's a lot of steel, though.
These pictures are...
And they get it for free.
They don't get it for free. You look at these pictures. These people do something that I...
Oh, I mean money-wise.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't imagine people actually doing this. I mean, they show this super tanker, and then they show it gone because these people have just ripped every piece of steel off of it and carried it away on their backs.
Wow.
These pictures are worth looking at.
I mean, some of the things I can understand, like, oh, they took the fire extinguisher, they took, the stair railing, they took the chairs, that kind of stuff. The doors, you can take the hinges off and take the door. But, like, eventually you get to pieces that are just big, heavy pieces of metal bolted together and welded together. You can't really take them, especially not without extremely powerful tools.
Yet this supplies 80% of Bangladesh's steel, this industry.
Wow.
Yeah, these are some very sad-looking people.
I'd be pretty sad if I was hanging out in a tanker.
I mean, I guess
every
the
day.
only glimmer I can see in this is that if nothing else, it proves the tenacity of mankind to survive no matter what. Look at what these people do to survive.
And people here think they got it bad if, like, the power goes out.
Yeah, or their blog gets spammed. So today's video game day, and since we've gone long, that's fine. We have 1.5 games to talk about.
Yeah, totally awesome.
So we're going to talk today about Mario and Luigi,
Woo!
Partners in Time, which Scott just beat. And then I'm going to rant about Ultima 4 until he stops me.
I thought it was 2.
No.
No?
No, 2 is... God.
We'll talk about it
Don't even
after.
get me into Ultima.
Anyway.
Well, I'm going to get into Ultima, but not just yet.
So, Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. I just beat it on the train today. And I liked the Superstar Saga a little bit better than the Partners in Time. But the Partners in Time was worth playing. If I would have known that it wasn't as good as Superstar Saga, I might have wanted to pay like $5 less, but whatever. It was still pretty hilarious. There's a lot of funny jokes here and there, and the one thing I didn't like about it was that you never really... They had a future world and a past world, and I thought there would be the cool mechanic that, like Metroid Prime 2 has. We're like, oh, you're in the future, you're in the past, the puzzles cross over like that. But not really. It's just the past is where all the game is, and the future is just the Happy Princess Castle Town where you do, normal town stuff. That was it.
Uh-huh.
And Superstar Saga, the Game Boy one, had more of like this exploring type of thing where you'd go different places and try to find stuff. This one was like very linear. You could always turn around, like when a level was real big, like a third of the way through it, they would give you like a little pipe to get back to the beginning in case you wanted to go back to the town castle to freshen up, get some more mushrooms and whatever. But other than that, it was like a straight-through game.
I don't know if I like that. I'm getting kind of tired of that kind of linear gameplay.
Yeah. One thing, though, at the end, I don't want to give away the end, but I will say that there were 3 bosses. There was a square boss and a cube boss.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was a flurry of save spots at the end. And once I figured out what they were doing with these save spots, I actually thought it was pretty nice. It was... there are always things that happen in games over and over again, and everyone's annoyed by them, and no one ever seems to correct them, no matter how many years they annoy us for. And in this game, they corrected one of those things. Right before the point of no return, right, there was a normal save spot. Then, like, I was about to go in this door, and there's this little suitcase character who is part of the plot, but whatever, and you're always carrying him around with you. And he comes out and he says, this is the point at which you will not be able to turn back. The bosses are ahead. You better save. And then he forces you to save. He, like, blocks the path, so you have to hit the save spot.
Wow. Final Fantasy IV could have freaking used that. Because I'm at the end on the GBA version. And for all of you who remember the end of that game, basically there's a final save spot. And then if you want to go fight, Zemus and all the crazy stuff at the end... You have to walk for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then you have to go through a couple minutes of plot and dialogue and all this crap before you can fight him. And then you die in 2 seconds, you have to do it again. You have to go through so much to fight him every time you lose.
Then I go through, and there is yet another save spot. And I save, and and I fight the first boss. And then after the first boss, I hit the save spot, and he says, do you want to go back before you save the princess? I guess I kind of get beat. Come on, everyone saves the princess in Mario.
No, the princess dies.
Yeah, the princess totally dies. He says, "Do you want to go back?" So whenever you hit this save spot, you can actually use it to teleport back and fight that boss again, and go back into the game where the boss is unbeaten. All right, so you can do that, or you can just save and continue and fight the next boss, and after that boss is yet another save spot, which will let you teleport back in time to before you beat the bosses. And then there's you go and there's this the third boss, and there's yet another save spot that will let you teleport back or save. So it's like I have the game saved at the end of the game after I've beaten the whole thing. There's nothing left to beat at all. But if I go and hit that save spot, I can go back into the game, before I beat the final bosses.
That's kind of cool.
It was very handy once I realized what the hell they were doing. It's like, oh, you've made the end less painful. Thank you.
Yep, now it's fun to just go back and fiddle with things when you're bored a year from now.
Yeah, there's not much to fiddle with, though, honestly, in this game. I mean, I pretty much cleaned out every single area for every secret I needed. And, I leveled up all the characters, level 31, and I didn't ever actually level up. I just went through the game straight. And because I pretty much mastered the use of all of the bros items, and you only don't really need to use all the bros items. Like the chomp ones, I never used some of the items. They were just harder to use than, the red shells, and they didn't do as much damage. So I never had a reason to use them. And I still beat the living crap out of the final bosses, doing a zillion damage, because I bothered to collect enough beans and get good badges. And collecting beans was a lot more fun than some of the other tasks available. Yeah. The bean collecting was actually more advanced in the Game Boy one. It feels like they kind of it's a good game because it's a Mario and Luigi, Mario RPG type game. But this one feels a little more like they hurried up to get it out, and they didn't, make the fullness what they could have. They just said, oh, we'll use A, B, X, and Y on the DS, and, we'll be all good. Whereas with the Superstar Saga and the Thousand Year Door, Paper Mario, they really made, the Paper Mario, oh my god, that's, the amazing.
Yeah, because I'm real leery of games like this in general. But Paper Mario is calling to me, and if I ever have free time, I'm just going to sit down and beat that game. Bam!
Yeah. So, for Partners in Time, if you're, a huge fan of the Mario and you like Paper Marios and Mario RPGs, you should get it, because it's not the greatest of those, but it's still great enough to warrant playing. But if that's not your thing, then this is not the one to play. You're better off playing the Game Boy one or Paper Mario on the GameCube.
Paper Mario on the GameCube it's just fantastic.
It's totally, and it's much bigger and more interesting.
And there's a Goomba girl.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this Goomba girl. It's just cute.
She's real cute.
So this podcast kind of went long, as they tend to do when we're real opinionated. But real quick, a nice aside, Ultima 4, The Quest of the Avatar. Now, this was an NES game, and I just have a question to the world. Has anyone actually played all these Ultima games, and are any of them actually playable? They're all just these terrible monstrosities, and I could never play any of them for more than about 10 seconds without just getting pissed off and stopping.
I just tried to play, 3 of them?
Yeah.
On the NES downstairs, or the computer ROM NES emulator downstairs. And all 3 of them, while some of them seemed like they had interesting components to them, all 3 of them were just completely unplayable, terrible games that I just... it was just painful to even try to do anything. Talking to people was hard.
I mean, there's one Ultima game that I've ever played that didn't suck as much. And that was Ultima 4, The Avatar. Because it's the only one that looks like a real NES game. It works like a console game. Of course, it came out for the PC, too. And if you play that version, well, I'm sorry. It's a completely different game. Play the NES version. It's probably the best Ultima game ever created.
I have a feeling, though, that, Ultima on the PC was something different. Because
I played several of them on the PC. They're terrible games.
Really?
Yeah.
Because whenever I hear people talk about Ultima in a good light, they seem to always be talking about PC games. I never, when they're talking about
Well,
Ultima NES is like something else.
They all came out on the PC.
Mm-hmm.
And Ultima Zero, the first one, is just this piss-poor, like, semi-3D dungeon crawl thing. And there was no plot at all, really.
Is that one of those ones with the first-person perspective?
Kinda.
And you drag items like into like the arm slot, the chest slot.
It's not that sophisticated.
Oh, I like those ones. That's like Dungeon Master. Those are great.
Yeah,
I love
or
those.
Dungeon Hack I used to play. But basically, all the Ultimas were on the PC, and they were all just these plotting, terrible, arbitrarily difficult games. Like, some Nintendo games are arbitrary, you know, pick the right warp area, or throw the holy water on the right brick. But just to give you a sample, because Ultima 4, in my opinion, is the best of these games. And it's actually a really good game, except for the fact that part of the plot is that you have to find, like, these 7 runes and these 7 stones and all these different items. And here's an example of the locations of these items. One of these runes is if you go to a certain town called Pause, which is south of another town, and you go into the town, and you walk over to where the stables are. And then you walk, like, 2 spaces to the left and 3 spaces up, and then you hit A and search. You'll find this critical plot item that you need to win the game.
Isn't there like a character in the game who says, "Hey, look, search the stable to find the item," or anything like that?
Barely. You'll find a guy on the other side of the world, completely unrelated, who will say, like, there's something special in that town. And there's someone else on another side of the world who will say something like, something stables. That's probably the easiest.
Is there any sort of connection between them at all?
God. Let me put it this way. That's probably the easiest one to find.
Great.
I mean, like, you can have magic in the game, right? But not only do you have magic points, but you have spell components. Like, 10 different kinds of spell components. Some are cheap, some are expensive. Only some cities have them for sale, and they only have certain ones for sale. And to learn a new spell, you have to learn which components to use. As in, literally, you have to remember, based on people you talk to, that it's Mandrake, Ash, and something else to cast this spell in order to know how to cast the spell.
I would just write them all down on a piece of paper.
Yeah, you have to use a piece of paper. You can't win this game. You have to write down gobs of information and memorize things, and memorize that certain colors go with certain virtues, that go with certain symbols, that go with certain stones. And it's just this... I hate this game so much, yet I played it constantly because I was convinced that there was something to it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, now I know better because I read GameFAQs and I found out that there's nothing to it.
Really? Nothing at all?
Nah, the game's just kind of and when you finally beat it, it's just arbitrary and crap, and the ending's kind of blah.
The ending is blah? Usually games like that have a crazy exciting ending.
No, in fact, I won't link to it because I don't want to spoil it, but if you Google around, you'll find a site that has pictures of the entire end of the game. It's just some text.
That's it?
Basically.
Wow.
I mean, the Ultima games form this giant, epic, overarching plot, and the continuity is ridiculous. Like, you'll be a party who kills this evil guy named Mundane in a previous Ultima game. And then in Ultima 4, if you remember, because the world's always the same, where the Skull of Mundane is, you can go get it, and it's this powerful artifact. And in fact, you have to get it to beat the game.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
It'd be cool if the games didn't suck ass.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm looking for, because I'm done ranting, I could rant forever, is there anyone out there who listens to Geeknights who actually played and liked any Ultima game ever? Because I want to talk to you. I got some questions.
Yeah, also, if you can beat any levels in the Silver Surfer for the NES. I'd like to hear from you also.
We should just have a tournament with anyone who listens to Geeknights who's close enough to us. You get a stopwatch timer. Whoever lasts the longest wins.
No, I knew a kid way back in the day who actually had the cartridge, and he could beat a few levels of that game. It was scary. on a cartridge, no less. No saving and loading business.
All right, so we're done. This podcast went long. My final bit is simply that we recorded a new closer, and tell us what you think. It's just information about the podcast like it was last time. We added the phone number to it. The phone number that Scott said incorrectly a couple podcasts ago.
Yeah, that was just a little confusing. The correct phone number is in the closer. Call it. Leave us messages.
And that was Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geek Nights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.